Good day. This is Terry Difazio. I'm here with my partner in crime, the incredible Todd Pronto, and you're watching Soundcheck. We've got a great show for you today. Well, I thought we did, but we don't.
It's mediocre at best.
Yeah.
No.
We're going to be talking about a band that I've never, ever talked about before, Nightwish.
Never heard of them.
Never heard of them? Gee, you didn't hear it from me.
No. I think you have a T-shirt on.
Oh, right.
My T-shirt is Metallica's Black Album.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the T-shirt that I wore today. They saved a lot of money in merchandising by just having their cover be black.
I can see that.
I wonder if that's why the Beatles did the White Album.
Probably. They didn't want to spend any money for any color.
Oh my gosh, I'm totally going to do that for my next album. I'm just going to pick a color, call it that.
The red album, the green album.
Yeah, and then just buy a bunch of Hanes T-shirts that are that color. Say it's the official merchandise. That's a fantastic idea.
Well, it's been a long time since we've done a show, and our producer, Tracy Ashman, has told us that we need to get a show done. So, I've been reading and listening to various, CDs and artists and things like that. And there's going to be more of these because there's some more newer material coming out now that it's the first of the year. But I bought this book a couple of months ago. I don't know if you can see it, but it's called Once Upon a Nightwish. And it's the first 10 years of their existence. It's quite a thick book, and I read most of it out loud to my wife. She wanted to hear all about it. Yeah. This goes all the way back to actually when they were in high school.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it talks about their music instructor and how he encouraged each one of them, and how some of them actually went to school together or maybe a year apart.
Oh wow.
Most of these guys and gals, well, one gal anyway, they were mostly born around 1976, 1977. They're right around, so right now they're all in their early 40s.
Yep.
What was so interesting about all of this was how they sort of got together and they molded their sound. They started the band in 1996. And by the way, I want to tell you about this book. Even though it's written in English, there are places and people I can't even pronounce. If I told you that the guitar player's name was Empu Virolainen, that's actually pretty easy. Some of these I can't even pronounce. Some of the places and some of the names in these.
That doesn't sound that easy to me. Empu what?
Empu Virolainen.
Oof. I wouldn't be able to get
or
that.
Something like that. I figured most everything would be an O-N-E-N and it would be easy, but I mean, really. And the punctuation marks, there's probably 5 punctuation marks for each name.
Oh, my God. That can get tricky.
So the band starts out in 1996, and it talks quite in depth about the songwriter,
Yep.
Thomas Holopainen.
I've heard that name.
Yeah, and how his lyrics can be very, very dark, and he is somewhat of a private person and doesn't really express himself well except through his music. And as we go through here, I'll try to remember the bits and pieces where he writes songs that are really reflections of himself or things he's observed.
Yep.
And he lets his expression come out that way. So they originally were going to start out as an acoustic act. And then they realized that their original singer, Tarja Turunen, had a voice much too classically and operatically trained and was much too strong for an acoustic act.
Yeah.
So they decided to try this, that, and the other. And in 1996, they formed Nightwish. And their first album was called Angels Fall First. And by the way, you would have never guessed this by me saying this, but I own all these CDs and DVDs you're about to hear. I own all of them. This only covers the first 10 years of their existence, right up to and including when they fired Tarja Turunen. And I'll explain why they did that and how that all went down. I can't say that she's blameless, but I can't say that she's fully to blame either.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things in this book, I'll tell you, that were borderline shocking.
Yeah.
Their road crew did some things that I would like. I'm saying to myself, what are you, nuts? The other thing that I noticed too was the band. The band drank a lot, but the road crew was much worse. There was never any references to drugs, though. They weren't a drugging band, but they were definitely a drinking band.
Interesting.
They changed labels a couple of times until they finally, eventually ended up on Nuclear Blast, which is a German company.
Yeah.
They were on Spine Farm for a while, and Spine Farm is actually quite popular all throughout Europe. There's several artists, for example, I think Within Temptation was on that label for a while, and there's several other bands that they, like I said, that they mention in here that were on these record labels. So when they started out, they do Angels Fall first, and if you listen to it, it doesn't sound anything like their last album they did with Tadia, which was called Once.
Yeah.
Very, very different sound. And to listen to them progress through the years, going from, you could hear the band mature, and you could hear the songwriting getting better, because Thomas was pretty much the only songwriter.
Huh.
Now, that's not like your band, is it?
I'm pretty much the only songwriter in my solo act. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I try to have somebody else write my songs, but they don't show up.
No, they just don't. And you said something one time that I think is probably one of the truest things, that you as the artist will get more meaning out of a song than anybody who's listening to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of the songs that Thomas writes, I would have never guessed what it was he was talking about.
What it was actually about.
Until he explained it. Some of them were pretty straightforward, and you could pick them up. But for example, one of the songs that I like a lot, it was called "I Wish I Had an Angel." Mm-hmm. This was a song about this was off their last album with Tadia in 2005. I think that one came out. He said his girlfriend was on the dance floor, and a couple of three guys were hitting on her, and she was dancing, and he actually wrote the song about her dancing with these other guys.
Oh, yeah?
He said, I put a disco beat to it, and I don't know where he got that from, because it's not a disco beat at all.
No.
It maybe was lost in the translation between Finnish and
Maybe.
English, because I have to admit, it's more of a danceable tune than most of their stuff. But it was one of my favorite songs.
Did he write it as a jealousy standpoint, or like he didn't know her and he was watching her dance with the?
Well, he was.
other
I guess
guy's
you could say he was kind of upset.
Yeah. Okay.
But hey,
Well, who wouldn't be?
and if you listen to the words really closely, you'll get lost. You'll kind of be wondering what it is he's writing about.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things. For example, I could never understand what he meant by "I'm in love with my lust, burning angel wings to dust." I couldn't figure out what that meant, but in his mind, it means something, and that's great, because I love the song. I really, really love that song.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's funny how you can interpret a song different, because I think when we hear a song, we relate it to us.
Yeah.
And you're never going to be on the exact same page as the person that wrote it. I think that's what Bob Dylan was so great about a lot of times, is people would ask him, well, this song's about this, right? And he'd always say, well, what do you think it's about? Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, that's really what matters. Mm-hmm. You know, what you as the listener gets out of the song.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think there's different schools of thought on that. Some people might want everybody to know what the song's about. Some people might want to just know what your interpretation is.
I'll give you an example. There's a Gary Moore song I remember from 1984 or 83 called "Murder in the Skies." Mm-hmm. That was so blatantly straightforward. If you didn't get that song, you have been living under a rock. That was about how the Russians, the Soviet Union, shot down Korean airliner 007 over the Sea of Japan. That was pretty easy to figure that one out. Yeah. But I've got to tell you, when you live in Kati, Finland, where it's probably dark 98 hours a day,
yeah,
and you live in that, your outlook on life is going to be a bit different.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you look at a lot of the music, like where punk music came from, it didn't come from the Caribbean.
No,
it was beautiful all the time. You know, it came from the back alleys and the dinge and the rain and the angst. You know.
Oh yeah, definitely did. So as Nightwish moved along, I believe the next album that came out was called Oceanborn in 1998, and you could definitely hear a stark contrast
Yeah.
in the two albums. Then 2000, they did Wishmaster, which actually had a lot of punch to it. If you ever heard the song Wishmaster or She Is My Sin, turn the volume down before you put it on. If you've listened to anything else, this album is quite loud.
What year was it?
This was 2000.
Yeah, so they were still. Pro Tools is just starting to take over around. Then. It hadn't really taken over, but yeah, they that tape, they were probably maximizing as much as they could out of the digital sound, right?
Yeah, I don't know what they said they were using, but it was really funny. When they started recording, they had this recording studio. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but it was a big deal when you had 4 tracks.
Yeah.
4 tracks was a big deal because most of these bands, I realized back then, they'd all go into the studio and record all together,
Yeah.
like it was live.
Yeah.
They didn't do a whole lot of multi-tracking even back then, which was surprising because there were, multi-track machines.
They were only working on 4 tracks in their first album.
First couple, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I've recorded my first album on 4 tracks, and I'll tell you, it isn't easy.
No. Now the
Yeah.
drummer gets more tracks than that. Just
Yeah, now
for
I think the drummer
themselves.
gets about 8 tracks all by himself.
Probably, at least. That's crazy. I recorded a bunch of my stuff on 4 tracks, but I was only doing acoustic guitar and vocal for the
Yeah.
most part.
I know.
So you got a whole band. I mean, they got what, keyboards, guitars.
Yeah. Yeah, and which is a stark contrast to their last album that they did in 2000. Gosh, was it 2014 or 2015? They used 260 tracks. No, I'm sorry, 600. The computer can only play back 250 at a time. That's right. I stand corrected on that one.
I would hate to try to mix that. I don't even know where you'd start. I mean, obviously, the engineers knew how they were putting it together, and there was a reason they used that many tracks. But man, I can't imagine equalizing each track to make it sit right. And
I just came to realize I can't even count that high.
it's pretty high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of them. I like Thomas's analysis of it when they said, how do you keep track of all these? He says, I don't. I let the engineers do that, and I sit on the couch. And I tell them what I like and don't like.
I would do the same thing.
Yeah. So moving along, the Century Child 2002 was another big step forward for them. And offhand, I can't think of the exact tracks, but I think that they did the song, Oceanborn was one of them. And back in 2010, I used a song off that album to do a video, which I have somehow lost. But I used a track off that, and that was another step forward for the band. They like I said, their sound kept maturing. It kept becoming bigger, stronger, harder edged, much harder edged.
Yeah.
They were very much in your face. And when they started getting big, they started. I can't think of the man's name. Like I said, all these Finnish names, there were just too many of them. The band had a manager. They went on a tour of South America. They finally made it somewhat big back in about 2000. And they started touring, and they went to South America. And this is where things started to get really strange. They were playing these gigs, and back then, security was pretty lax.
Yeah.
So you went into a place, and the booker or the promoter that had you there, he had his wife, his children, who were, teenagers or more, and their aunts and uncles, and they were security, and they were basically just taking pictures all the time. So in one of these concerts, and I don't know if it was Argentina or Brazil, it was one of those two, Tarja Turunen had sort of gotten involved with this guy by the name of Marcelo Cabuli, who was from Argentina. And he kept telling her that she has a good voice and she should be getting more money and she should be this and this and this. So during one of these concerts, some guy jumps up on the stage and grabs her and tries dragging her off the stage. And of course, security's taking pictures, so they don't know what to do. And the band is dumbstruck. They don't know what to do. Marcelo jumps up on stage and beats the crap out of the guy.
Yeah.
And saves her. So you can see what happens next.
Security. They bring their own security with them?
Well, after that, I guess they were a lot more cautious with it, and of course, now the 2 times that I saw Nightwish, yeah, they do have, they have their bouncers way up front in case things get out of hand. But back then, so she gets really shook up, and all of a sudden there's a bond. This guy saved my life. This guy was going to, who knows what he was going to do, kill her, rape her, who knows what.
Right.
But he grabbed her physically, quite forcefully, according to the book. I guess there was going to be some evil intentions, but Marcelo hit the guy right in the head first and beat the crap out of him. So,
Good for him.
yeah.
Wow. That never happens in the folk world.
I don't think it's ever happened at a Grateful Dead concert either.
Probably not.
For a different reason, though.
They can, where's the stage, man? It's like the music's coming from behind us. Turn around.
Oh, yeah, there's the band, man.
Wow, that's crazy.
So she forms a bond with Marcelo Cabuli,
Yep.
and then he becomes her manager. So the band's got a manager, and she's got a manager.
She has a manager. Oh.
And then the friction starts.
Yeah, I bet.
The friction starts because then what I've read was everybody always wondered why she was fired. What was happening was every time the band booked a tour, Marcelo would step in and say, "We want 20% more."
Wow.
So the band got it in their minds, especially the drummer, Juka, Nevalainen, and the other manager they had too. God, what's his name? I can't remember his name. Anyways, Iwo something or other.
Iwo Jima.
Something Finnish that I can't pronounce, and they decided to play his game, and they say, okay, they would say, this is what we're playing for, and they make it 20% lower than what they knew he would ask for. So when he said, I want 20% more, they said, okay. So they played that game for a while, and then it got to the point where they would book a tour, and he'd say, yep, everything's fine, and 2 weeks later, no, we don't want to do it now. Half of these dates we don't want to do.
Wow.
So there was a constant friction between the management.
Between her management and the band's management.
Yeah. And for some
kinda
reason,
funky,
he was very impulsive like that. He'd agree to anything and then change his mind later. This just kept grinding on and on and on throughout the years. So eventually, they did what my favorite album was. I'm looking through here. Once came out in 2004. That's the first album of theirs I ever heard.
Yep.
And I heard that in 2009. So I hadn't even heard of this band until 2009.
And they've been around since '96 or so?
Yeah.
Wow.
This genre of music has been around that long, and I didn't even know about it. And it was not thanks to any local radio stations.
Wow, no.
As a matter of fact, I even doubt you'd hear them on very many FM stations.
I doubt it.
You'd hear them on Spotify, you'd hear them on Pandora, you'd hear them on Last FM.
Yeah, radio's gotten very safe to the point where they only play like 20 artists.
Yeah.
And yeah.
The other night, my wife and I. By the way, my wife and I don't like very many bands together. I could probably name 3 we like together: Queen, Gary Moore, and Nightwish. And we were listening to Ghost Love Score, which was, by the way, Ghost Love Score was written for Tarja Turunen. But you should hear Miss Floor Jansen sing it.
Yeah.
And I was reading the comments below from the Wacken Open Air Festival 2013, and even the other 2 times she sang that song live on DVDs, and Tampere, Finland, and what was the other one? Wembley in London. And this one guy said, at the end of this song, she said, with the notes this woman hits, I think I had a floorgasm, because her name is Floor.
But
And I'm saying, I don't think I could have expressed that any better. I really couldn't have expressed that any better.
She should have T-shirts made.
And the other thing I'll tell you too, I'll do it in another segment, but there are vocal coaches who listen to her sing that song, and the vocal coaches are blown away by it.
Yeah, I watched that. You sent me a video yesterday or the day before of that, yeah.
But anyways, that song was written for Miss Tarja Turunen, and she does an incredible job with it. And so that whole thing wraps up. They did a few DVDs. I'll just read them really quickly to you. They did from Wishes to Eternity, which was a DVD in 2002. They did Highest Hopes 2005 and End of an Era in 2005. And by the way, I have all of them.
Yep.
So this only covers up to 2005, End of an Era. And when we saw that concert on DVD, Blu-ray, it was I was absolutely amazed at what I saw. They did it at a hockey stadium in I believe it was Sweden or Finland.
Yep.
And it was, by the end of that show, Tadia Turunen was the only one that didn't know she was being fired. Everybody else in the band knew.
Oh.
They wrote her a letter, a very big, long letter, explaining everything in a lot of detail. And they said, here's a letter, open it tomorrow. So I didn't actually realize the band was going through that much turmoil when I first saw it.
Huh.
Yeah, it was really quite interesting. And like I said, looking back at it all, I can't say that she's fully to blame because she put up with a lot of baloney. She had to have a very special diet and she had to do special things for her voice. And a lot of times that wasn't taken care of. But as the band pointed out later, you had a manager. Why didn't he take care of this stuff? You know? And why was he always changing his mind? Why didn't they work together and do this? No, the band would have to come up with a tour, and then he'd say, oh, I don't like this. Or he'd say, oh, okay, and then 2 weeks later, no, I don't like this. So you can see where the friction came from.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't know any of that.
There were press conferences. Both sides had press conferences. And Nightwish, especially Thomas, excuse me, didn't really want to talk about it. Her press conferences were quite different, though.
Yeah.
Hers they thought were overdone drama. So, and the other thing I found that was quite fascinating, too, as soon as word got out, which only took less than a day in Finland, as soon as word came out that she was fired, you wouldn't believe how many female singers wanted to audition.
Oh, I bet.
Oh, there was at least a half a dozen within a day or two. Not the likes of which. There was this one American band that's from Minnesota. They're called Echoterra.
Yep.
And there was another band from, I don't know, I think New York, called Asmodeva. Both of those ladies wanted to audition, and I've heard both of those ladies, and either one of them could have filled those shoes easily.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there were other, a lot more other. I think Elise Reed from Amaranth was another one who could have easily filled that spot, but they thought she was too young and inexperienced.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, they didn't mention this in the book. They didn't go much further than the end.
That was about
the end of her era. But people wondered why they didn't ask Floor Jansen, since they actually toured with her and her band after forever, and I guess the reason was they didn't want to break up her band. But that's another story for another time.
Right.
They ended up. Well, it doesn't mention this in the book, but they did. They ended up with a Swedish singer named Annette Olsen, and she is a very fine singer for the stuff that Thomas wrote for her. But when she tried to do Tadia's old stuff, it really didn't go. And if you ever see the video comparing the three singers doing Ghost Love Score, poor Annette struggles, and she can't. She just doesn't have it.
It's out of her range.
It's out of her range,
yeah.
And it would be like trying to have a folk guitarist play heavy metal.
Right.
It doesn't go. As a matter of fact, here's a good example of that. You remember Rob Halford of Judas Priest?
Mm-hmm.
Back in '93 or '94, he joined a band called Fight, and he sounded he sounded weak.
Yeah.
They were way too heavy for him. You would have never thought it, but his voice didn't fit that band.
Yeah, I mean, I think that happened. I mean, it'd be like having James Taylor try to sing Freddie Mercury's stuff.
Yeah.
He couldn't do it. Got a great voice.
Yeah.
But Freddie Mercury's range is just...
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's it was amazing when, like I said, the songs that Thomas wrote for Annette sounded very good.
Yeah.
But when she tried to do the older stuff, it sounded very weak. What's more interesting than that, and like I said, it's not in the book because this ends in 2006, actually. If you listen to Nightwish now with Miss Floor, she does her own stuff, and the other two all easily and sometimes even better.
Huh. She just got the range, huh?
Yeah, if you listen to the song Storytime, listen to the original from Annette, and then listen to Floor do it live, and you'll go, huh. This is, and she does the operatic parts that Annette didn't even do. Right. But to be fair to everybody here, Tadia went off, and she has her solo career, and she's made millions of dollars. Annette has her solo career, and it's doing quite well. I have, I think, a couple of her CDs I've gotten off Amazon download I've paid for. Did a very good. And, of course, Miss Floor has done tremendous things.
Yeah.
Of course, when you see Miss Floor, which is good, the segue into the next part of this show, she is obviously, I would have to say, a Viking goddess when you see her on stage. The 2 times I've seen her, she walks out, and all of a sudden, you're paying attention because this woman is very powerful to look at. At 6'1", and with a voice like that, it's pretty easy to see why she commands so much respect.
Yeah.
I spoke with Nightwish's engineer in Quebec City, and he basically said that Miss Floor drives this band now.
Yeah.
He makes them better, and I have to tell you, every time she does Go Slow Score and she hits those notes, you watch the video, and Empu, the guitar player, who's about a foot shorter than her, they bump fists every time. They both love how she does that. She's added more to the song than even the original.
Huh.
So it's pretty interesting to see. So now that we've gotten through this book, and I got to tell you, it's a great read. If you want to put up with some really crazy BS, I mean, some of this stuff was totally off the hook.
That's kind of how rock and roll is, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. Now that they're on Nuclear Blast and they have a regular record label, I don't think you get away with that stuff. Of course, now they're, things are much tighter. They have their manager. They're on Nuclear Blast, and it all worked out better for everybody.
Do you think there'll be a continuation from that? I mean, that book doesn't say part 1 on it, but
No.
I bet they'll continue it or pick it up from where they left off at some point.
I would hope that they would do another book, but I doubt it. The person who wrote this book, his name is, I don't know even how to pronounce this, M-A-P-E, Mape Olila is the person who wrote this book. And, there's one other person I didn't mention. Their original bass guitar player, by the way, was named Sammy Vanska. And he was actually a pretty good bass player. But he also had a real bad drinking problem, even worse than the band did. Oh. And Tadia was about the only one who didn't drink. She did not drink. She was not a drinker. Very, very little. And so Sammy played for a few albums, and then when they got Marco, I believe it was 2002, the band took a totally different look because Marco was 10 years older than they were, and they really looked up to him. He'd played in some other bands throughout Finland that had a lot of respect. Yep. I think Stratovarius was one of them, one of the bands from Finland, and there was a few others. And they were like, this guy's a little older, a little wiser, a little more seasoned. Although they did have to show him his place in the band because he was bringing some of his old baggage and he was saying some things on stage that we really shouldn't say.
What do you mean, like just old curmudgeonly stuff?
Well, no, some profanity.
Oh.
And they were saying, it worked well for that band, but we really don't want to do that here. He says, oh, okay. So he settled in, and here's another singer all of a sudden. Oh. And he's even actually written a couple of songs or two. And he's a very versatile. He even has a guitar that has a bass on one neck and a folk guitar on the other. Huh. So he's added quite a bit to the band. So getting Marco Haitala, I hope I'm saying that right. Marco
sounds right to me.
When they got Marco in the band, they shifted gears and they got heavier. I mean, they got heavier immediately with him. Huh. Now they also had a second vocalist, and he and Tadia really played off each other well, and they got along really well. Yeah. The other funny thing that I remember was the guitar player Empu and Tadia were always very good friends. He was the last one to actually admit we got to get rid of her. He really liked her, and they got along well. But he was saying in the book that he would be talking to Tadia backstage, and they'd be chit-chatting, and very friendly, and all of a sudden Marcella would show up, and she'd clam right up and leave. So the dynamic there was quite interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like he was an interesting type manager.
Yeah, they talked about some of the videos they shot and how they had to go into the wilds of Finland and get eaten by mosquitoes and things. And some of the outfits they had her in the beginning were really bad, horrible outfits. Then as time went on, the outfits got better, And if any of you want to know more about this band, and I highly recommend that you do because it will expand your horizons. I've got all their materials. I know where all their videos are. We have permission from Nuclear Blast to show their videos, and we do a generous job with them.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you don't think you've heard of them before and you watch Channel 15, you've heard of them before. You've seen them.
And if you ever get a chance to see them, go see them. They're well worth it. A combination of opera and symphony and straightforward hard rock, which leads us to this album right here. This is not the actual front of the album. I put this on myself. I bought this on Amazon downloads.
Yep.
I paid for the downloads. But this band is called, it's not actually a band, the album is called Northward. And this is Miss Floor Jansen doing a solo project with her former guitar player from After Forever. And I'm not even sure I can pronounce his name. We're going to have to give it a try.
Uh-oh.
Well, I got the first two. Jorn Vigo, something or other. I can't. And there's some other name at the end, and I can't remember what it is. But she does this solo project, and you've heard this one.
Yeah, I listened to it on my walk the other day. I put it on the old Spotify, which I like to call Spiffify. Put it on the old Spiffify and walked around town.
Now, if you've ever seen Todd headbanging, it's not quite as funny as watching me headbang.
Yeah.
Because I get headaches when I do it, and my wife laughs at me when I do it.
I just get dizzy.
But this is a totally, if you listen to this album and you think, oh, Floor Jansen, Nightwish, it isn't anything like it.
No, it reminded me a lot of, I can't think of a specific band, but it reminded me of something that you would have heard in the mid-'90s. Because the one thing that the mid-'90s did, and this album did, and what I liked about it, is there's almost a definitive hook to the guitar parts. It's not just, and there's obviously hooks to Nightwish's stuff, because there's symphonic stuff in there, but it's almost groove orientated, not like Rage Against the Machine, but I'm just thinking of Rage as an example because their riffs were so very the focal point of the band, and I think the guitar riffs are a big focal point, other than her vocals, obviously. But I that's what I liked about it, is it had a little bit of that 90s flair to it, but with better production. Oh yes, if you can't produce a good album today, give up. Because you've got all the tools now. Oh my! Whether you matter free programs, whatever DAW you want to use, they're all good. Yeah. Some are just better. It's just about learning it. Yeah. I remember. I mean, my first projects were on a 4-track recorder, but they recorded onto a cassette tape. So you're not really getting the highest quality when the tape is, I don't know, what, a 1/16 of an inch, or I don't even know how. I think it's 1/4 inch. On a cassette tape? Yeah, I think it's 1/4. That isn't very big. Yeah, it's and only on one side of it. And no, you might be right. It might be 1/8 of an inch. It's pretty small. I think it's smaller than 1/4. But anyway, I mean, like a cassette tape. Like we used to go to what was called Brooks Pharmacy then, which is where Rite Aid is now. And buy Maxell or TDK cassette tapes and record these 4 tracks, and then bounce 3 of them down onto one, and then bounce 2 of them down onto one, so we could get almost 8 tracks. And every time you do that, the signal degradation came in, and there was more hiss. And so we went to a Northern Vermont Music in Troy, Vermont. Was on DAT, and I believe he had 8 tracks, but he might have had 16, which is more than we needed, because I was an acoustic guitar and vocal, and every once in a while I'd have somebody else play an acoustic guitar with me. So, but it was like going to the big time sound isolation booths. And you are right. That was an 1/8 inch tape, because a regular reel-to-reel tape, the ones we used to get commercially, those were 1/4 inch, right? And I recorded on 1/2 inch, 8 tracks on 1/2 inch. Wow! And 8 tracks on 1/2 inch at 15 IPS sounded pretty nice. Yeah. What's the highest they went? 2 inches? 2 inch 24 track. Yeah. And actually they did 2 inch 16 track, but when they went to 24, they didn't bother making the tape bigger because it was too expensive. Yeah. I was spending $25
for a tape that would only last a half an hour.
And that was back in the.
That was back in the 80s.
So I mean, that's like,
I think
that's like almost $100.
I think somebody told me that a 24-track analog tape today to do what I did would be about $256 for a tape. And they're running at 30 IPS, so you get 15 minutes out of it. But it had a sound to it that
Sure.
is very unique, and a lot of bands are doing that.
Yeah, there's definitely a retro craze right now.
Mm-hmm. So Miss Floor, who is from the Netherlands, gets her old guitar player back, Jorm Vigo something or other that I can't pronounce.
Something.
And he's from the Netherlands, and he's from her old band, and they decided to do this project. And I'm impressed with the fact that it was pretty straightforward. And I was also impressed by how good this guy plays. It was like, wow, this guy is really good. Because I have a CD of the band After Forever. I've even got a CD of her other old band, Revamp. Mm-hmm. And it's nothing. There's nothing like this. This is so much better. She doesn't do anything operatically. Straightforward hard rock vocal.
I noticed that every once in a while she'd like hit a falsetto note, but definitely not operatic. Just a high note that most people can't do. But they really got me on, and I brought it up on my phone so I'd remember the name of it because I'm really bad about remembering stuff. Get What You Give, that song.
Oh yeah.
I was
second song on the album.
Yes, I was pleasantly surprised, and it's my favorite one because when it gets to the guitar solo, it's an acoustic guitar, and I was like, because there's these heavy riffs going over, and then this pristine, clear acoustic guitar solo, and I was like, what? And I rewound that like 6 times because on Spotify you can go back 15 seconds. So no. So they got props for me right there just for doing that because I love the acoustic guitar.
And we at the end of this show we are going to play the video to While Love Died, which was the first one. I just happened to be going through YouTube one day just looking for different things, and I spotted this, and I said, wait a minute. I was looking at something on the side, and it was like, what in heck is this? So I typed it in, and this came up, and I was like shocked. This CD came out in October of last year, and I don't know why she didn't tell me about it.
Yeah, why didn't she?
Why did she just call me and say, hey, I got a new CD out with my old guitar player? I'd have bought it, and I did.
I did.
So, well, I didn't buy the CD because I don't like the front art cover wasn't anything special.
Yeah.
So I just
you have to get it imported too, or
no, it was. You can get them on Amazon or any of these other places, and I think I believe this is on. This might be on Spine Farm, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. But like I said,
I might be able to tell you,
Miss Floor, I'm very disappointed you didn't call me to tell me about this because I would have bought it a lot sooner.
I'm going to see if Spotify will tell us because I still have it up.
So if you're looking for something new, something fresh, something in your face, hard rocking stuff, this is the album for you. And this guitar player really, really kills it. So he even has one of those what do they call them? Pitch shifter pedals like Joe Satriani uses. He does a great job with that too. Says
it's on Nuclear Blast.
Oh, it's on Nuclear Blast. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's why I can play it because we have permission from Nuclear Blast.
Yep. That's what it says. That's what Spotify says.
I believe
Spotify knows all. Mm-hmm. No, I have no idea. I have a big love-hate relationship with Spotify.
Well, yeah.
What are you going to do?
I just have a hate relationship with most of over-the-air radio.
Yeah.
When you consider the average pop song is basically a vocalist, a drum track, and a synthesizer.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then you get into something like this, or something like Nightwish's albums, or even other bands like that, like Epica. Within Temptation, I'm going to get the new Within Temptation came out February 1st. We will be talking about the new Within Temptation album too, in the weeks to come. You will hear so much contrast to the homogenized, I hate to say it, plastic music that comes out of actually FM radio now.
Yeah, AM's pretty much all talk now.
Yeah, talking sports.
Yeah, pretty much. I wonder if FM's going to end up going that way eventually.
Don't know.
It's hard to say. Plastic is a great way to explain it, though, because these beats are regurgitated,
Mm-hmm.
and they're proven. You know, it's almost like we don't want to mess with the formula, or people reject it. Like when Coke tried to make new Coke, and everybody went, "We want the old Coke." I think that's what everybody's worried of. Man, if we use a different drum beat and some new processing, people might not like it. So we better just keep putting out the same old crap.
Yeah.
And just give it a new package.
Yeah. You if you want music that's going to expand your horizons, you've got to dig for it, and you'll find it because
It's there.
Because
It's
overwhelmingly,
totally
Todd and I have both heard this. If we find something new, I get this all the time. Where do you find this stuff?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not like some kind of a rocket scientist that I'm the only one that knows where to get this stuff.
It's in the very, very far dusty corner of Walmart.
That's the end of our show, folks. We're leaving.
That's where you find new music.
Yeah,
You
right.
go to the very far corner of Walmart and you lift up a curtain, and that's where it is.
And they got one old geezer back there, a metalhead like me, going, "Hey, you want to hear something really good?"
I thought you'd never be here. I've been waiting for weeks.
Hey,
Yeah,
hey, man, I've come all the way down from an acid trip, man, just to give you this here. So,
yeah. You know, the one good thing about YouTube, there's a lot of good things about YouTube, but there's algorithms built in, and when these bands upload their music, they're able to tag stuff. So Northwood,
yeah, Northward.
they will tag Nightwish because, you know, they're familiar with them. They'll tag other artists
Yeah.
in that same genre. So when you are listening to it, and YouTube also keeps track of an algorithm of like what you are looking up, so it knows that you like symphonic metal. It knows you like floor. And it's so in those recommendations.
Yeah.
The recommendations on the side of YouTube videos. If Terry sends me a video from this album, my recommendations are going to be completely different than yours based on what I search for. And it does help you find new stuff that most likely you'll like, because it just knows. And there's no coincidence, friends, that if you're looking up Ivory dish soap on Google someday, and then you watch a YouTube video and there's an Ivory dish soap ad, that's not a coincidence, because somebody else got a different ad when they watch the same video. Big Brother is helping you discover new music, but it's very possible to do.
And every time I see one of those ads come on, I always click thumbs down and go skip.
Yeah,
Every time.
You got to wait for the skip ad.
And if you want to pay for it, you can not see those at all.
Yeah, that's how it's interesting, but yeah, it's not hard to find new stuff. You just need to.
You just need to do a little research.
And you need to be open to
You
it,
can't
too.
sit on your couch and listen to the local stations or even some of the semi-local stations, because you're not going to hear it. You're not going to hear anything new. And the other thing that I noticed too, this is something I've noticed about Miss Floor and Tadia Turnen. What was her name? Simone Simon of Epica. And Within Temptations, Sharon Donadel. By the way, Sharon Donadel never took vocal lessons.
No.
And as you can tell, she's not as good as them, but she's good.
Yeah.
They do a comparison. They do a studio song and how it's done, and then they do it live, and you hear that they're pretty damn close.
Yeah.
They're not auto-tuning these ladies because they're that good.
That's not. That's not pop music.
No, I was watching another video. I don't even know who the guy was, but they had some guy on one of these like American Idol shows. It wasn't American Idol, it was something like it.
Yeah.
And he was singing this song and walking through the audience, and all of a sudden the auto-tune didn't work, and his voice went flat.
Really?
Oh, boy. I wish I should have written it down. Yeah.
Sorry. That's funny to me.
Yep.
It used to be, not that long ago, back in my day. No, I'm just kidding. Just a few years ago, they didn't perform with auto-tune. Auto-tune was just something that they did in the studio to nudge notes a little bit. But when you performed, you couldn't. And now you can hear the auto-tune working sometimes, especially when you watch award shows and stuff. you can hear that auto-tune working, and I always thought, what would happen if the power supply died to this thing, and apparently
It did that
it
day.
did. I need to see this.
I got to find it for you again.
It's going to be embarrassing. Do you suppose it's almost as embarrassing as when Milli Vanilli went out to sing and their CD started skipping?
Yeah. Yep.
What's more embarrassing? To admit that you really can't sing at all, or to try to sing and still show people that you can't sing at all?
Yeah.
I'd rather be Milli Vanilli, I think.
Well, after all of that, they tried to do albums on their own with their own voices, and nobody was interested by then anyway. Nobody cared.
That was such a devastating hit.
I never liked them anyway, but the band that they had that actually recorded their first album, they were a bunch of older people, and they were good.
They were like studio musicians.
Yeah,
right?
but you knew you couldn't sell them on stage because they were older, kind of homely. They couldn't run around and jump around on stage. It was so funny back in I think it was back in 2010 or 11. My brother-in-law and I are watching the Steve Miller Band on TV.
Yeah.
And my grandchildren at the time, who were young teenagers, they were going, "What are they doing?" And Rainey and I looked and said, "Well, they're playing their instruments." Well, where are the people? Where are all the dancers? Like, oh.
Where are all the dancers? I think, Terry, that you and I should come up with a super group. I think we should take the Milli Vanilli model, and we should record a bunch of stuff in the studio, and then find a couple good-looking people to go out that can dance and lip-sync the stuff and see if we can make some money. They really were ahead of their time. When was that, in the 80s? Late 80s, early 90s?
The 90s. Vanilli,
Yeah.
I think it was 90s, but I'm not sure.
Think about how ahead of their time they were. That's almost commonplace nowadays, to completely fabricate a pop star.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should do this.
Well, if you ever saw any of Britney Spears' concerts, everything is lip-synced.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's no way you can dance like that
Right.
and stay in tune.
No.
You can't. You can't do it. It's physically impossible.
Yeah, you'll
know?
get out of breath. And
Although I have seen Miss Floor thrash around a bunch, and then when she stops, she can sing really well. But she has to stop first.
yeah, you can't just keep the dance up. Yeah, I think that's fairly common with and that's one big thing, like the Super Bowl halftime show this year with Maroon 5. It was pretty not good.
Mm-hmm.
But I give them props that they were not lip syncing, and you could tell they were not lip syncing because you could hear him breathing, and he was hitting a lot of flat notes. But he was hitting a lot of flat notes because he was running around this big stupid stage. But then you get Steven Tyler. He ran around a big stupid stage and he didn't hit flat notes.
Yeah, when he was sober, he was good.
Yeah,
very good.
And Mick Jagger ran around a lot and he never sang in tune, so it didn't matter.
No, nobody expected him to sing in tune. Nope.
They just wanted to see him dance. But I was actually surprised at the Super Bowl halftime show when Adam Levine started singing. And you could instantly tell that he wasn't lip syncing, which surprised me because I thought you had to lip sync at Super Bowl halftime shows. And that he wasn't using autotune, because if he was using autotune, whoever was running the autotune should be fired because they missed everything. Because he was really off key.
Yeah, you know who's actually good? He runs around on stage and he sings pretty well with Sammy Hagar.
Yeah.
He's very good at that.
Some people can do it. And then, like Freddie Mercury, he didn't run around on stage. He did a little bit.
He pranced around.
He pranced around, yeah. But not crazy running because he had to hit these insane notes.
he would stop or he would be walking.
Yeah, he would make sure that he had a good breath to do it, but
Yep.
to perform it's just funny. I don't know. I think Milli Vanilli were trailblazers.
Yeah, I'm just glad they're gone.
They've been gone for a long time. I remember I had the tape. I was in like junior high, and I had the cassette tape.
And you admit to this?
I do. I think I got it for Christmas or something. But I had the cassette tape, and when the article came out obviously it came out in the news, but when we got like the Burlington Free Press or whatever, there was this little clipping in the paper about Milli Vanilli being exposed for not actually being the artist on their album. I cut it out and I stuck it in the cassette tape, and I found it like, I don't know, a couple months ago. So I have the cassette tape with the newspaper clipping inside of it.
Yeah, I know. It gets pretty bad. Any final words, Todd? We're going to be wrapping up here in a second.
I don't think so.
I'm glad you enjoyed
so.
This Northward album.
I did. That's kind of like right up my alley. I like grooves, and I like heavy guitars that aren't shrill, and they're not shrill. They're beefy, but they're precise. Like you can hear the notes. It's not buried by a lot of distortion. You can hear what he's doing.
Yeah,
I like it, and her voice is
second to none.
Of course.
Yeah, she just has this way of singing pop, hard rock, or opera. Take your choice. She can do it. This one happens to be a hard rocker,
unreal?
and she does even some nice soft ballads.
They called Tommy a rock opera, but there was nothing opera about it.
No.
These guys could actually do a rock opera. They should do it.
Actually, if you want to know the truth, you just put me onto something I'd never really thought of. If you ever listen to the album Imaginarium by Nightwish, I would guarantee that was actually a film score. He actually made that into a movie.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and he said he'd never do it again because he said, I used to think that producing an album and producing a video was hard work. Doing a movie score is unbelievably hard. But
I've heard that.
The album and even the movie Imaginarium is something else. And Nightwish's last album, Endless Forms, Most Beautiful, could be in that league too. But Imaginarium was quite a production, to say the least. That tour lasted over 2 years.
Yeesh.
And it burned out one singer, and that's when they ended up with Miss Floor. But
yeah, 2 years is a long time.
yeah, I don't know what was up in Thomas's head, but all I know is he's currently writing the next album. This summer, they're going to start recording it, and it's supposed to be out next year.
2020.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that they tour again because if they come around to the States somewhere, I want to see him again.
How many times have you seen him?
Twice.
Twice.
I'll see him again. As a matter of fact, I know my wife won't want to do this, but if I get a chance to meet and greet, I'm going to pay for it. I want to meet them again.
Yeah, why not?
They have a different drummer now because their original drummer, Juka, has chronic insomnia. And so he basically is like a bookkeeper, accountant. He's very good at it. So they leave him in Finland, and
So he's still involved with the band.
yeah,
He's
they
just
didn't fire him. It was a medical thing. He just can't tour because he can't sleep. So
That sucks.
their new drummer has a very different style, and it was Marco said it's kind of like the difference between Juka was kind of like John Bonham,
Uh-huh.
and Nightwish's new drummer Kai Hato is more like Ian Pace of Deep Purple.
Yeah.
But with all the old songs, the new drummer is playing the notes exact. As a matter of fact, for the song Storytime, he couldn't figure out how to do the drum in what I know what you call not kind of like the bridge. There's a very long bridge to the song Storytime, and he couldn't quite figure out how to do it. So he wrote it out note for note in drum music,
Wow.
and he did it.
That's dedication.
Yeah, and he got it. So, anyways, we want to thank you for your time, and we are going to play the video from While Love Died, from the band, or the album Northward. And this is Terry Difazio saying, we'll catch you on the flip side. Have a great day. It was great being with you.
You love me, you hate me, would you please decide? We felt hatred through the things we didn't say. I guess honesty sometimes really breaks things up. I love you, I hate you, and I can't decide what feels better when darkness has devoured you're smiling and you're doing fine. You can charm and love, make me remember why. But that could be a facet